Have you ever found yourself obsessing over someone long after they've left your life? Or clinging tightly to a relationship, a memory, or even a fleeting moment, as if letting go would mean losing a part of yourself? If you're honest with yourself, you probably have. Most of us have. And if you've ever wondered why you got so attached, why it hurts so much, why you can't move on even when you know you should, then you're not alone. Attachment is one of the most powerful and often misunderstood forces in the human experience. It can make us feel alive, hopeful, and deeply connected. But it can also leave us feeling broken, confused, and stuck. And sometimes, the most painful part is realizing that we weren't actually holding on to a person, but rather to what we thought they represented: love, security, validation, or maybe even redemption. We don't become attached out of nowhere. There is always a reason, always a wound, a longing, or a void that precedes the attachment. That's the part most people overlook. They assume their pain comes from the loss of someone special, but often, the pain comes from a deeper place inside us, something that was already there before that person even arrived. The truth is, we tend to attach ourselves most intensely to people or experiences that seem to offer us something we believe we're missing. That could be affection, attention, a sense of belonging, or simply the feeling of being seen. When someone makes us feel special, especially when we've gone through life feeling invisible, it's easy to confuse that momentary warmth for something eternal. We start to believe that without them, we're incomplete. And that belief is where the attachment takes root. But here's the hard reality. Most attachments are not love. They are survival mechanisms. They are emotional responses born out of fear, out of scarcity, and out of the unhealed parts of ourselves. We don't hold on because something is right. We hold on because we're afraid of what might happen if we let go. This journey, the one you're about to take through understanding the reason you got so attached, isn't about blaming yourself or feeling ashamed. It's about awakening. It's about shining a light on the unconscious patterns that have kept you emotionally chained and learning how to break free from them with compassion and self-awareness. So if you're ready to stop asking why it still hurts, if you're tired of reliving the same emotional loops, and if you're finally ready to understand what's really behind the attachment, the root of attachment, what you were really searching for. We often think attachment happens because someone was incredibly special, because the connection was so real, so intense, so magical, that letting go feels like a betrayal of the truth. But what if I told you that the reason you got so attached had less to do with them and more to do with you? Let's go back, not to the relationship itself, but to the emotional terrain inside you before they arrived. Ask yourself, what were you longing for before you met them? What were you quietly aching for, maybe even without fully realizing it? For many of us, attachment doesn't begin with another person. It begins with a gap inside, a void we've carried for years. Maybe it started in childhood, when your emotional needs weren't fully met. Maybe it was a moment in life when you felt unseen, unworthy, or not good enough. These wounds, though buried under daily responsibilities and adult distractions, remain active in the background. And when someone comes along and says the right words, shows you attention, or reflects something back that you've been desperate to feel, suddenly, that person seems like everything you ever needed. But they're not. What they are is a mirror, showing you the love, security, and validation you've been yearning for. And instead of seeing them clearly, you see the solution to your emotional hunger. That's where attachment forms, not from love, but from a perceived sense of rescue. You didn't get attached because they were perfect. You got attached because they made you feel whole, even if just for a moment. And when someone gives you a taste of wholeness, especially when you've spent your life starving for it, you cling to them, not because you love them, but because you love how you feel when you're with them. It's not your fault. Human beings are wired for connection. We are not designed to go through life without emotional bonds. But what makes attachment so complex is that we often don't understand the emotional programming that drives it. We confuse comfort with compatibility. We confuse emotional intensity with destiny. And we confuse the temporary relief from pain as a sign that someone is meant to stay forever. But let's pause for a moment and reflect. Why did you really need them? What need did they fulfill in you? What part of you felt seen or rescued in their presence? That's the part you need to pay attention to. Not them, not their actions, not their promises, but what they symbolize to you. Were they the first person who made you feel attractive? Was their attention a validation you never got from your parents? Did their love feel like the acceptance you've been chasing your whole life? Because if that's the case, and for many, it is, then the reason you got so attached wasn't love. It was healing. Or rather, the illusion of healing. You weren't in love with the person. You were in love with the feeling they gave you. A feeling you thought you couldn't generate on your own. This is why some of the most painful attachments are also the most confusing. Because when we try to detach, it feels like we're losing oxygen. But what we're actually losing is our illusion. The belief that someone else was the key to our worth, our healing, or our happiness. So what can we do with this awareness? First, we must stop romanticizing the pain. Just because you felt deeply doesn't mean it was love. Attachment can mimic love. It can dress up in the same clothes, speak the same language, and leave you crying in the same way. But true love empowers you. It expands your identity, rather than shrinking it into desperation. Second, you need to acknowledge the parts of yourself that were already hurting before the attachment began. Healing doesn't start by blaming the other person. It begins when you get radically honest with yourself. Why was I so vulnerable to this connection? What was I really searching for? And here's where the truth gets uncomfortable. The real reason you got so attached is because you thought they could fix something inside you. Maybe not consciously, but emotionally. That's what the connection represented. And that's why it was so powerful. Because in them, you saw a path to wholeness. And in losing them, you felt like you lost that path too. But you didn't. The path was never in them. It was always in you. That person didn't give you something you never had. They simply activated something dormant inside you. Your capacity to feel alive, worthy, connected. And if they could awaken it, that means it already existed. It means you don't need them to feel whole. You only need to reconnect with that part of you. So, the next time you catch yourself saying, "I can't live without them," pause and ask, what did they represent to me that I don't believe I can find within myself? That's the real work, not moving on from them, but moving back to you. Because healing attachment doesn't mean becoming cold, distant, or emotionally numb. It means becoming whole, so that when love comes again, it doesn't arrive to complete you, it arrives to join you. And maybe, just maybe, the greatest gift of this attachment was not the relationship you had, but the realization that you are worthy of love, attention, and connection without needing to chase it in someone else. The illusion and the expectation. Who were you really attached to? Let's ask an honest question. Were you truly attached to the person as they were? Or were you attached to the idea of them? It's a subtle difference, but it's everything. Many people stay emotionally bound to someone not because of who that person truly is, but because of who they believe that person could be. We fall in love with potential, with moments, with brief sparks, and then our minds take over. We start to build a version of them that may only partially reflect reality. We remember the best parts, the fleeting highs, the words they said once, and we replay those moments like proof of a deeper truth. But here's the uncomfortable reality. A lot of your pain didn't come from who they were, but from the expectations you built around them. You were attached to a future that never happened, to a version of them that only existed in your imagination, to promises that were never really grounded in action. You weren't in love with the present reality. You were addicted to the dream. That's why it hurts so deeply. Not just because you lost someone, but because you lost what they represented, a future, a fantasy, a hope that finally, maybe, you were going to be loved the way you always wanted. And that kind of loss is devastating. The human mind doesn't like uncertainty. It wants to make sense of things, to find patterns, to predict outcomes. So when someone comes into your life and suddenly you feel desired, seen, and validated, your brain lights up with possibility. This is it, you think. This is the one who's going to love me right. And without realizing it, you assign that person a role in your story, the savior, the soulmate, the person who finally understands you. But here's the trap. They didn't agree to play that role. You wrote it for them. And that's where the illusion begins. You didn't just attach to the person. You attached to the story. You attached to the hope. You attached to the belief that now, at last, you were worthy. And so, when they didn't live up to the version in your head, when they acted inconsistently, pulled away, or revealed sides of themselves you didn't want to see, it didn't just feel like disappointment. It felt like betrayal. Because they weren't just walking away from you. They were walking away from the dream you built around them. And that's hard to grieve. But the truth is, the dream was never real. It was beautiful, yes. It gave you moments of joy, maybe even made you feel more alive than you had in years. But it was a projection, your mind filling in the gaps between who they really were and who you needed them to be. So what do you do with that? You start by taking back the power you gave away. You start by seeing the difference between who someone actually is and what you imagined they were. You stop blaming them for not living up to a script they never agreed to follow. It's not about demonizing the other person or erasing the connection. It's about acknowledging that part of your pain came from attaching to a version of reality that wasn't sustainable. Let's be honest. If they had consistently shown up, loved you deeply, respected your boundaries, and communicated clearly, would you still be here, grieving their absence? Probably not. Most attachments are strengthened through confusion, through inconsistency, through mixed signals and emotional highs and lows. It creates a chemical cocktail in your brain that mimics addiction. You start craving their presence the same way a person craves a drug, not because it's good for them, but because of how it makes them feel temporarily. That's why you can know someone isn't right for you and still miss them desperately. Because addiction doesn't care about logic. It only responds to the emotional spike. So again, ask yourself, who were you really attached to? Was it the person or the way they made you feel for a while? Was it the real relationship or the story you told yourself about what it could become? These are difficult questions, but they're also liberating. Because once you separate the illusion from the truth, you begin to see clearly. You stop chasing ghosts. You stop waiting for someone to return who never truly showed up in the first place. And you begin, finally, to ground yourself in reality. The reality where you are enough. The reality where love does not have to come with pain, guessing, or fear. The reality where attachment doesn't control you, where you can feel deeply without losing yourself in the process. That is your power, not the ability to cling to someone tightly, but the strength to release what was never really yours, and to reclaim what always has been, your self-worth, your clarity, your peace. So the next time you find yourself spiraling in thoughts about someone who's no longer in your life, pause and ask, am I missing them? Or am I missing the fantasy I built around them? That one question can change everything. And once you begin to see the difference between truth and illusion, between presence and projection, you begin to detach, not with bitterness, but with wisdom. Because now you know. You weren't weak for getting attached. You were simply human. But you don't have to stay attached to a story that no longer serves your healing. Learning to let go, freedom begins with you. Letting go. 2 simple words. But when you're standing at the edge of emotional attachment, they can feel like the hardest thing you'll ever do. Letting go doesn't just mean walking away. It means releasing the grip your mind and heart have wrapped around someone, something, or some imagined future. It means finally telling yourself the truth and allowing that truth to set you free. But here's what many people get wrong. They believe that letting go is an act of forgetting, as if healing only happens when you erase memories, cut ties completely, and pretend the past never existed. That's not healing. That's avoidance. True letting go isn't about forgetting. It's about facing. Facing the pain. Facing the illusions. Facing the version of yourself that thought you needed someone else in order to feel whole. It's about honoring the fact that, yes, you were deeply attached. And yes, it felt real. And yes, it did matter. But it no longer serves your growth. And you no longer have to hold on to a story that keeps you stuck in suffering. Letting go begins when you understand this fundamental truth. You are not losing a person. You are releasing an idea. And the person you thought you couldn't live without, they were never the source of your worth. They were simply the mirror reflecting back your hidden longing. So here's the hard truth and the gentle truth, all at once. You became attached because there was a wound in you, a wound that craved attention, love, security, or maybe just presence. And someone came along who lit a spark in that wound. It felt like healing, but it wasn't. It was activation. That's what attachment does. It awakens pain disguised as connection. But now that you see it clearly, you have a choice. You can keep replaying the story in your head, hoping that one day it turns out differently. Or you can take your power back. Letting go doesn't mean you don't care. It means you finally care enough about yourself to stop clinging to what's hurting you. It means you no longer make someone else responsible for your happiness. It means you stop assigning the role of healer to someone who was never meant to stay. Yes, it's going to hurt. Yes, there will be moments where your heart aches for the comfort of familiarity, even if that familiarity came with pain. Yes, you will miss the version of yourself that existed when you felt chosen, wanted, adored. But in the space that follows release, something sacred happens. Clarity, peace, self-ownership. You begin to realize that you're not broken. You were just believing a story that no longer fits. You begin to remember the parts of yourself that existed before the attachment. And slowly, one breath, one day, one gentle choice at a time, you return home to yourself. Here's the thing. You don't heal by holding on. You heal by surrendering, by allowing what needs to leave, by trusting that letting go is not a loss. It's a return to truth, a return to wholeness, a return to you. And that doesn't mean you won't love again. It doesn't mean your heart is closed forever. In fact, it means the opposite. Because when you let go from a place of awareness, you create space for something better, not necessarily a new person, but a new experience of yourself. You begin to love without fear. You begin to connect without clinging. You begin to trust without losing yourself in someone else's presence. The next time someone enters your life, you won't hand them the key to your worth. You'll walk beside them, whole. Not because they complete you, but because they complement the completeness you've already found within yourself. That is the power of letting go. Not the absence of emotion, but the presence of wisdom. Not the erasure of memory, but the rewriting of meaning. Not the death of love, but the birth of freedom. So if you're still holding on to someone, to something, to a dream that has long expired, take this moment to breathe. Not to force anything, not to rush the process, but to remind yourself that you are allowed to be free. You are allowed to release what no longer feels like love. You are allowed to move forward, not because they were wrong or unworthy, but because you're ready to meet yourself in a deeper, truer way. Letting go is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your becoming. Rebuilding after attachment, creating love from wholeness, not need. Now that you've learned to let go, a new question rises gently from the silence. What comes next? You've spent time grieving the illusion, separating fantasy from reality, and slowly reclaiming the parts of yourself you had unconsciously outsourced to someone else. But healing doesn't end with detachment. It evolves into reconstruction. You've dismantled the false scaffolding of connection that once held your sense of self. Now it's time to build something real. Not just stronger relationships, but a stronger you. One who is no longer driven by emotional hunger, but grounded in emotional clarity. This next stage is about learning how to love and connect from a place of wholeness, not need. Because when you love from need, love becomes possession. It becomes grasping, fearing, expecting. You monitor their tone. You read too deeply into their silences. You live in anticipation of abandonment. But when you love from wholeness, love becomes freedom. You are no longer desperate to be seen, because you already see yourself. You're not obsessed with being chosen, because you already choose yourself. And so, the connections you create are no longer built on rescue missions. They're built on mutual respect, emotional honesty, and shared growth. But here's something important to remember. Wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It means self-awareness. It means you no longer hand your sense of worth to someone else for safekeeping. You no longer look to love to complete you, but to enrich what's already growing within you. So how do we rebuild love from this new place? First, we revisit our patterns, the unconscious scripts we've been acting out for years. Ask yourself, who do I tend to fall for and why? Am I drawn to chaos because it feels familiar? Do I equate anxiety with chemistry? Do I ignore red flags because I fear being alone? You don't have to judge yourself for the answers. You just have to be honest. Awareness breaks the cycle. It gives you choice where once there was only compulsion. Second, we practice emotional responsibility. This means you no longer expect someone to heal what you haven't faced within yourself. You don't make someone else the container for your emptiness. Instead, you become your own safe space. Through inner work, reflection, and learning how to sit with your feelings without needing someone else to soothe them. Because here's a hard but liberating truth. The more you heal, the less intoxicating, unhealthy love becomes. You stop craving the highs and lows. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You start valuing safety, stability, clarity. What once felt boring now feels peaceful. What once felt like love now feels like a trauma response. That shift, that internal rewiring, is how you know you've started building from wholeness. Third, you learn the art of slow love. Rushing into deep emotional entanglements often comes from fear, the fear that if we don't secure someone quickly, we'll lose them. But love that is real does not need to be rushed. It unfolds. It breathes. It has room for questions, for pacing, for clarity. When you're whole, you don't fear the space between connection. You honor it. You allow the other person to show you, not through words alone, but through presence, consistency, and aligned values. And more importantly, you show yourself. You don't hide behind performance or people-pleasing. You bring your authentic self, knowing that whoever stays, stays by choice, not out of illusion or obligation. Finally, you redefine love itself. Love is not someone solving your loneliness. Love is not someone rescuing you from your wounds. Love is not someone filling a void that only self-acceptance can fill. Love, when it's healthy, is recognition, not completion. It is one whole human meeting another whole human and saying, let's walk together, not because we have to, but because we choose to. That kind of love, the slow, steady, conscious kind, is only available when you've done the inner work. When you've learned to live with yourself, sit in your solitude, tend to your own garden. Then, and only then, can you truly say, I no longer love to escape myself. I love to share myself. This is the highest form of connection. Not dependence, not addiction, but freedom shared. So as you move forward, ask yourself, what kind of love am I now available for? What version of me will I bring into the next connection? Can I honor my needs without demanding someone else meet all of them? Can I be vulnerable without losing myself? These are the questions that form the foundation of conscious love, love that grows from rootedness, not desperation. And if you're still healing, that's okay too. Healing is not a race to find the next person. It's a return, again and again, to yourself, until the next connection feels less like rescue and more like a celebration. Because that's the gift of doing this work. You no longer attach to avoid yourself. You connect because you found yourself. And in that space, love becomes what it was always meant to be, not a lifeline, but a dance. Not survival, but joy. Thank you for allowing me to share this journey with you today. May you find the courage to let go, the grace to heal, and the freedom to live fully.